All right, everyone. What is happening? It is a Tuesday on week 9 of the NFL, and it is the trade deadline. And how about that? So I'm Steve M3TR1CS. That's your boy.
DJ Triggs.
And boom, together we are No Debate Sports. So how about that, Triggs? You got some trade deadlines approaching. You had some players move, especially with what they say when that clock's ticking down. Deadlines get results, and that's exactly what happened today.
Yeah, I mean, there was a lot of just like little trades, and then there were some trades that, oddly enough, we actually talked about or mentioned some of the names, especially in the last week or so. Yeah, I don't know, man. Like, I guess we could just run them down really quick.
Let's run them. Let's run through these guys.
So let's go with J.C. Jackson from the Chargers to New England, right? That one was kind of like, why?
Yeah, kind of out there. I'm not too excited about that action that's going on there. Yeah, I mean it is what it is, but I'm not really taking much out of that one.
Then we got Randy Gregory moving again to San Francisco, which
interesting.
I can't even be mad at that because San Francisco is basically just taking a flyer on a guy that does good stuff here and there, but is also a head case at the same time.
And right, and that was that was a team he played for originally, right?
I think so. I think so.
Yep.
Or was it Dallas?
I know. I want to say both.
Both. Okay.
Yes.
And then when you add that with Chase Young coming from Washington over to San Francisco, like, wow. And I remember, I don't know if it was you or me, but one of us brought up Chase Young, I think last week.
Oh, that's you. That's you.
That was me.
Yes.
And it was like, of all the teams, San Francisco, man.
Totally.
Like, that's going to be a problem.
Yeah, that is definitely a problem. It definitely bolsters their outside pass rush, and they're looking really, really solid there. So I'm glad they did that. And that's where I kind of was feeling that they were going to make more actions on defense, but I was also thinking that they could be dealers on defense as well to somewhat bolster their offense, because Debo is that X factor for that offense. So not having him in the lineup definitely has an impact. And as well as their left guard being banged up, that kind of plays into it as well. But I was really thinking this was a team that was in the mix for Davante Adams. Bring Davante Adams over to San Francisco and then take one of those key element defensive pieces, hopefully a linebacker, take one of those 49er backers and bring them over to the Raiders. So that was a trade that I thought would go down today that did not.
Right. And then Atlanta got Kentavious Street from Philly and Van Jefferson from the Rams, which, again, I don't know. I understand why Van Jefferson's getting moved because, you know, they got Puka over there now.
Yeah.
Breakout star. But why did Atlanta go for Van Jefferson when they've already got enough young guys? And
I like it. No, I actually like that move because it helps you go a little bit bigger at the goal line, take out Scotty Miller, bring in Van Jefferson. And then if one of those other outside guys doesn't work out because of injury or something, I mean, we already saw Drake London get banged up in this game on Sunday. So it really helps to have that insurance policy. I think Van Jefferson's a solid guy. It might take him a little while to get a little used to playing in this offense, but I do like having Van Jefferson in Atlanta. They got a nice piece there, but more importantly, they got to figure it out ASAP at quarterback. And I think Taylor Heineke is probably the way to go moving forward.
And then Kansas City, everybody thought they were going to get a wide receiver, but they just bring in the guy that they just had last year in McCole Hardman from the Jets. And it makes sense for the Jets, and I guess it does make sense for Kansas City. They know how to use them. And the Jets basically have too many wide receivers, if you think of it that way.
But so does Kansas City.
Yeah.
They both do.
I know.
Neither of them knows what they're doing at the wideout position. It's very bizarre. I mean, I think Rashee Rice is really coming along, but you're going to roll the dice a little bit with MVS. But MVS should be the guy. He is tall. He is fast. He should be one of those 3 receivers out there every single play. And I think he would be a phenomenal compliment to Travis Kelce if they can get it to work. Why it's not working, I don't know. I just don't get it.
Now Tennessee and Philly flip Terrell Edmonds and Kevin Byard. Like that was, I mean, you're talking about an all-pro going to Philly at safety position. And I just don't understand how like the 2 best teams in the league or the 2 teams that just went out and was like, take all of our picks and all of our players that we don't use. And I'm talking about Philly and San Francisco at this point, but like,
yep,
they went and like loaded up, like their names pop up multiple times. And it's like, oh, okay. You can tell they're trying to win. Like
totally. Yeah. Philly and San Francisco, they're going all in. They know that this is their year and they really have to go for it now. I think Philly more than anyone else because Philly kind of sees how that window shuts once you sign a quarterback to a longer deal. San Francisco has plenty of money to spend, so they can definitely keep upping themselves moving forward and make more of a push once Brock Purdy kind of figures things out. So I like that there. I'm a little concerned about Dallas for the long haul. I don't know how Dak Prescott all of a sudden went from turning his switch off to turn it on, and yet there's still no Tony Pollard in this offense. Weird stuff going on there, but I think at the end of the season, one of those 3 will represent, well, no. I think one of those 3 is definitely in the NFC Championship game. Do any of those 3 make it to the Super Bowl? We'll see. I still have Detroit as a team in the mix of those 4 as well. But yeah, it's interesting how those 2, Philly and San Francisco, are starting to make it work.
Well, speaking of the NFC East, then you got Leonard Williams going from the Giants to Seattle. That one really caught me off guard. I'm like, whoa, that's a big time player, and Seattle of all teams is in the mix. And I was like, all right, well, good for you, Seattle.
Yeah, Seattle definitely wants to make sure that they can go toe to toe with these teams. And I mean, the moment they're probably going into the playoffs, and they may square off in the very first round of the playoffs against San Francisco. So they want to know that they can go toe to toe with them. Plus, the way that team is evolving on offense. Now we have back-to-back weeks of Jackson Smith and Jigba scoring touchdowns. There's some really promising results going on with that team. The evolution of Geno Smith, Kenneth Walker staying healthy. Things are looking good for this team. So they are really making those moves in the right direction. And we'll see if Devin Witherspoon can really lock down that nickel. Had a good week recently, had a bad week recently. We'll see what happens. So they're moving in the right direction for sure.
And then this one made me so upset. Montez Sweat goes to Chicago.
I love it.
You're talking about like a premier defensive player.
Totally.
And I'm like, what exactly is Washington doing? I understand a rebuild, but you do still have to have vet players. Why get rid of like your best defensive player? That really confused me. And then of course it goes to Chicago, and that I don't care.
Exactly. However, but both of those players, whether we're talking about Montez Sweat or we're talking about Chase Young, we are talking about serious medical/injury concern between the 2 of them. Yeah. So I think this is actually a smart decision on their part. You want to get that off the books. You want to move on. You know you're still going to have that defensive tenacity. And I think this is really solidifying that, blanking on their head coach's name, Rivera, that Ron Rivera is going to be the head coach moving forward. And this is the direction he wants to go. So he has that ability to gain more assets in the upcoming draft, but still be able to have that hard-nosed defense moving forward. I think he knows he has depth.
And then Ezra Cleveland, big-time guard out of Minnesota, got traded to Jacksonville. Now that's a big upgrade. Like that
is huge.
They need that because of the running game and the passing game. Like you're just stacking up on offensive linemen, and that's one of the things every team should do.
It is, and it's especially a sore point for the Jacksonville offense. So this is a great move in that direction that I love seeing for that team. I really want to see it work out. I like the front part of their defense, the secondary not so much, but these are the moves that Jacksonville needs to make so that they can finish at the end of the season as one of these final four teams in the AFC.
Right. And then personal favorite here, Josh Dobbs going to Minnesota for like a bag of chips.
Pretty much, man. I loved it. Like literally, I was watching. Shout out to Colin Cowherd and his show. I was watching him and his co-hosts. They were actually talking about this. That like, hey, Clayton Thune is going to be starting in Arizona this upcoming week. They have Josh Dobbs. He's a brilliant-minded person to begin with, and Minnesota has this eyesore that they need to fill a quarterback. How about putting Josh Dobbs in Arizona? And literally within an hour of them mentioning it, it actually happened. So that was pretty cool.
Yeah, that one just made me laugh because he just got benched. And then I'm like, oh, of course Minnesota's just going to go get him. Why not?
Yeah, exactly.
And I know you brought up Detroit. They went out and got Donovan Peoples-Jones from Cleveland, which kind of puzzled me on Cleveland's part because Cleveland's they need more weapons in the pass game, and he was doing okay. Like he wasn't the star or anything, and then Detroit is kind of overloading themselves where Jamison Williams just came back this year after his suspension, and like I don't know, Amon-Ra St. Brown's doing his thing, so
yeah,
I don't understand that one.
I think that's more of just depth, really adding to it. I know they got Josh Reynolds there as well, but should anything happen to Amon-Ra St. Brown, then they can go Josh Reynolds, Jamison Williams, and go with Donovan Peoples-Jones as well, and working with one of those three guys in the slot. So I think that's the way to go. Definitely got Jahmyr Gibbs, and you have two other solid backs. One is banged up in Montgomery, but they are really solidifying everything on offense. And I think they want to check off every one of those boxes so they're ready to roll into the postseason. Plus, their games at the end of the season are indoors. I think they want to make sure they can put up every kind of fight that they can to make it so that they can go for that 1 seed, so they can challenge that and possibly get every single game at home at Ford Field, make life as easy as possible for Jared Goff because he plays so much better at home than he does on the road.
And then last but not least, the Green Bay Packers traded one of their really good corners to Buffalo for basically nothing.
Yep.
And I say basically nothing. Let me explain this. I found this on Twitter. Matt Schneidman, reporter for the Packers. So the Packers traded. They got a 3rd-round pick out of this, right? So
that's cool. That is cool.
No, it's not. See,
that's third?
Watch this. So they traded a 5th round and basically a Pro Bowl corner. So 3rd round picks for Brian Gutekunst. 2018, Oren Burks, Wisconsin, shout out, by the way.
Sure.
He's on the 49ers. 2019, Jay Sternberger. He's not in the NFL anymore. 2020, Josiah DeGuara. He got moved from tight end to fullback and doesn't play.
Right.
2021, Amari Rodgers, not in the NFL anymore.
Wow.
2022,
that was a huge
Sean
pick.
Ryan, 0 offensive snaps. And 2023, Tucker Kraft, who they had already drafted a tight end in the round before last year and then got Tucker Kraft. So literally all their 3rd-round picks for the last 6 years are
bust.
Wasted. Yeah. Bust.
Wow.
Yep.
Yeah, that's pretty interesting. And I mean, I think, man, that sucks because I do feel that you guys definitely did well on your first 2 picks. And I think that was something that I really look at, and many times I've thought about and said, hey, what if Green Bay would have taken Jackson Smith and Jigba instead of Samori Toure? Well, you wouldn't have had, Jaden Reed. You wouldn't have had then the edge rusher that you drafted out of Iowa, and you would not have Jaden Reed either. So it's kind of interesting how that dynamic changes if you roll back the clock. But man, you have to hit on round 3. And this goes into pro football and fantasy as well. I've learned, even from our experience of playing fantasy, that you need to hit on your early rounds of your draft. So in the NFL, I think that's got to be the same as well. You want to hit as much as you can those first 4 to 5 rounds. 6 and 7, you kind of roll the dice with. But rounds 4 through 5, you need to hit at least half of those picks. And you really want to hit 75% if you can. Or you can be the Seahawks and just hit on all of them. But I think that's how you really want to roll. And that's really disappointing to lose on round 3, because I feel like round 3 and round 4 are just as critical as rounds 1 and 2. Like, I know people are like, oh man, this guy's so much worse being a round 4 player than being a round 1 player. But no, that's completely not true. Rounds 1 through 4, it's basically just a meta game of figuring out where players are going to fall in a draft. But there is very little difference at all when we're talking an elite player at one position and an elite player at another. Not fantasy, but like legit NFL caliber, where there are many, many positions. Those top players being selected in round 1 can be just as good as the guys being selected in rounds 3 and round 4 for a completely different position.
Right. And I mean, not to pick on the Packers, but like, the guy doesn't hit on round 1 either. So like, I honestly don't understand how he's a general manager when like
right.
you're not good at the draft. And then like you just brought up the pass rusher from Iowa. Like, that dude is such a project that there was no reason why they should have drafted him in the first round.
So maybe it should have been JSN.
Yeah. And then on top of that, this is the same guy that traded Davante Adams and Aaron Rodgers. So like,
yeah,
you have nothing to show for it.
Yeah, I mean, I do support the theory of that stuff as long as you can bank it in return. Also, the Davante Adams deal was a failure of paperwork. That could have actually been an extra round up. It could have been a 1 and a 1. Instead, you guys got a 1 and a 2 from my Raiders. But that was a failure on filing paperwork in the specific amount of time to get that deal done. So that's really disappointing how that went. But yeah, I mean, looking at this, and I mean, the other thing too is like they had plenty of resources to gauge what they felt they had in Jordan Love. And I'm still not a fan of how that's playing out. And I'm with you on the play calling, but part of me still puts this on management, saying that they should have done more of their homework on this, and it's not working out right. I think it's both the head coach and the quarterback.
Yep. It goes from the president all the way down to me.
Yep.
But yeah,
quarterback.
That's all of our fun trades for the NFL.
Yeah, I do want to go back to Chicago real quick, because I like this. I like Chicago for being one of those teams that has more money to play with and more money to spend, as does San Francisco. But I love how you're bringing in these pieces of Yannick Ngakoue, Tremaine Edmonds, and now bringing in Montez Sweat. I like how they're slowly building up this defense in Chicago. So we'll see what happens. They have much more work to do, but I like the direction they're moving with that there.
Yeah, that I guess that makes sense. I can't like anything Chicago.
It's cool, man. Hey, I'm a Raider, and I was there the other week for the Raider-Bears game, and I love the culture, the culture of Chicago and the culture of my Raiders, being that kind of grindy, gritty city downtown. It's cool, man. That is cool. I'm sure plenty of people who have been out east to the East Coast, those teams are a lot like that, especially your Pennsylvania teams, your New York teams. I think that city culture is really cool. I love seeing that. So it was the first time I saw it, and glad to be a part of it.
Yeah, that makes sense. But before we get into NFL, I mean, it was the NFL trade deadline, but
sure was
probably the biggest trade of the day or the night, technically.
Something like that.
was the James Harden deal to the LA Clippers in the NBA. What
Exactly.
I don't understand how this happens, but the Clippers were bidding against themselves, and they clearly gave away nothing. Like, they gave away nothing. Like,
Yeah.
I see there's a couple picks, and then there's a pick swap and some second rounders, but like, yeah, the players they gave away were
Pretty, yeah. Yeah. I mean, it was, to me, I think LA definitely came out on this ahead. And I like the direction they're going. They need to make some kind of moves to make sure they're always relevant with the other team in LA. So they got to make that happen. But I mean, Paul George and James Harden worked so well in Oklahoma City that they left. They both left. They both demanded to be traded. So, yeah, how's that going to work in LA? I think it'll be. Oh, plus Russell Westbrook's there too. So there you go. I mean, you get the whole band back together. So it's the OKC Thunder in LA now, and Kawhi Leonard as long as he's healthy. So and plus, you and I both know how we both feel about Kawhi Leonard, even being a Clipper. So it is what it is. But I think they're moving things into the right direction. They have to do that kind of stuff to compete. So it is what it is.
like, to me, the Clippers are stacked if everybody plays the way they're supposed to play.
Right.
Like, James Harden in the last couple of years has become a distributor, going from like 30 points a game and like 6 or 7 assists to 20 points a game and 10 assists. Like, he led the NBA in assists last year.
Right.
Westbrook taking his role off the bench and like being an energy guy. Like, I don't know.
I like it. I think it's something where I think that chemistry and that maturity and learning from what they previously dealt with together in Oklahoma City is now going to translate to LA. I think it's going to be a positive situation, considering they all know they're all at the end of their careers. So if it doesn't work here, it's not going to work ever. And,
right.
Yeah,
they did shred their bench a little bit. I mean, giving away KJ Martin, Robert Covington, Nick Batum.
Okay, I like Batum.
Marcus Morris. Yeah, but they're all just old dudes that don't really do anything, to be honest.
That's true.
And they did bring in PJ Tucker, so like they got a defensive guy there, but their starting lineup could be really, really nasty. Like Westbrook, Harden, Paul George, and Kawhi playing the wings, and then Zubac playing the center. Like,
nice.
I don't see how Philly thought this was a good trade. And
right, exactly.
I understand that all of these guys are on last years of their contract or expiring contracts, so they could flip them pretty easily at the deadline in a couple months. And like the picks, I guess from all the talking heads, they're going to like package them to get a star player. But like, there's no star players out there.
Right.
All the good star players are locked up. And it's like, and I know they're like, they basically opened up like a max contract spot.
Sure.
By moving a max contract spot.
Okay.
Well, almost the equivalent of one.
Right.
So like I kind of was going through like players, and most of the players that are on like the last year of their deal are playing in LA for the Clippers. All of those guys are expiring. So do they expect to go get Kawhi Leonard or Paul George or like I just don't understand.
Yeah. Yeah, it's kind of an odd situation. Philly to me is restarting the trust the process again. And I think this is where we're at with that.
That's why Embiid might get moved. Like,
oh yeah,
like
you
if
should
the
force
guy
his
says
hand.
he wants to get moved, he's literally sat there through the entire trust the process. he sat through them going and getting like extra pieces and then a James Harden and then like
It's
he
not
won the
happening.
MVP and it still didn't work.
No, Philadelphia will never get it done. They had their best iteration of the team within the last 2 seasons, and it's not going to get there. That iteration is just not good enough. I think it's a
Right.
combination of the players, and I think it's Doc Rivers as well. I don't think it's going to work with those guys, so they had to change it up.
Yeah, I don't know, but it's weird, very
Yeah.
weird.
Oh yeah, it is a pretty weird situation. And speaking of weird situations, before we start up on these 2 NFL games, how about the 2 trades that didn't happen? One of which being a guy who I thought could force this trade in Davante Adams and the Raiders, and even him being a former Packer as well. It's weird seeing a guy that talented really just kind of wasting away with a team that has no offense at all. I have a reason for why I think he's staying and why I think he's still going to continue playing. Yet I don't understand why he's a James Harden kind of situation.
Okay, I'm listening.
Yeah. So my theory on this is I think Davante Adams is a much better person than a lot of these other athletes who really make a demand and want to say, "Hey, I'm gonna not play and I'm gonna force my way out." Somehow Davante Adams is just not cut from that kind of cloth. I think he's just a better person and a better guy, and he really cares that he puts his best foot forward regardless. And he's really showing that. And this is really a tough situation with him in Vegas now. At the same time, he did sign the contract, so you are kind of in a way kind of selling yourself to get that money. The other part of this, which is money dependent, is he played in the state of Wisconsin for the majority of his career, and especially when his contract really started to kick up to a high paid salary. Well, in Wisconsin, there is a relatively high state income tax, and you are taxed more, especially being a professional athlete, being such above the threshold of normal everyday people. That matters. And granted, every team, every player travels and they are taxed based on the location that the game is physically being played in. But I think part of this too could be that Davante Adams might see some more home games coming up for Vegas and say, "Hey, I'm going to make this income playing in Vegas." Again, players only get paid during the season. There are no paychecks when there are no NFL games going on whatsoever. That's how it works. So possibly with more games being played in Vegas, there's no state income tax, and he takes much more of that money to his pocket than he does when he played in the state of Wisconsin.
That's interesting. So I'm looking it up right now, but so the weird part about his whole contract, if someone would have traded for him,
Yep.
he would have only made, or they would have only had to pay like, I want to say it was like 7 million or so.
Okay.
Or was it? No, I think it's 3 million this year and 17 next year, and then so these first 2 years was a combined 20 million.
Yes.
The next 2 years was a combined 70 million. So
Yes.
like you could have got him basically for a rental for a year and a half, 2 years of playoff run.
Right.
And I don't understand why no team did that.
Exactly. And I had a theory too that if he was playing in this game this past Sunday, then more than likely there was some discussion going on with Detroit. And we do kind of see that today because there was the deal made by Detroit for more support at the wide receiver position. So obviously they were looking to upgrade that. So if I had to guess on things that weren't accomplished, I would definitely think that there was some discussion between Detroit and Vegas. I could also see there being discussion between Vegas and San Francisco. And I could see the only thing stopping that deal would be the owner, Mark Davis, because of the historic rivalry between San Francisco and the Raiders, especially being in Oakland at the time. So I would think that was probably an ego thing that nixed a deal to San Francisco, because it would clearly benefit both sides, benefit the offense of San Francisco and benefit the defense of Vegas. So that didn't happen there. But I do think that we're going to see Davante Adams get more upset. But at the end of the day, he knows that he's actually banking way more money for the rest of this season with Vegas than he would be with just sitting out, which would nullify the rest of his paychecks. So he's made a good salary for being a pro athlete for his career. It's I want to say it's around, after taxes, I want to say it's around 30 to 40 million.
I can check really quick.
Yeah, totally, man. Totally. So I think before taxes, it's around 50, but I think after taxes, it's around 30. And I feel like if he plays out the rest of this season, it would greatly bolster. I would think he would probably get at least a third of his career earnings just from this season alone. So I think that's definitely a huge contributor on why he's saying, you know what, I'm just going to bite the bullet, finish this season, and then force my way out after the season.
Well, actually, no, this season is really low for his pocketbook. So he's his current contract is 5 years, $140 million. So last year the base salary was $3 million. This year is $6 million. Next year is $16 million. And then the final 2 years are $35 million each.
Yeah, that's not going to happen. He's not getting the final 2 years of that contract. So it's pretty much now or never. This is it. So I think he's got to finish as much of this contract as he can, and then he'll force his way out to another team 100%.
Yeah, it's insane, man. Like, if someone cuts him, the dead cap that they're gonna get like smashed with is gonna be nuts.
Oh, it's like 50 million.
Yeah,
yeah. Within the next 2 years, it's like 50 million a pop. Yeah. So it's money you're stuck with. But look at it this way too. And I think the other third team that I brought into him was in the NFC was Philadelphia. Well, to me, the biggest prototype of Davante Adams right now in the NFL is ironically a guy you own in fantasy and a guy that I've compared with in AJ Brown. AJ Brown is very much that Davante Adams 2.0. It'd be cool to see them play together, but with them starting to make it work with Julio Jones, it's just not going to happen.
Yeah, that's why I just don't understand why someone didn't trade for him. Like, literally
it's weird.
Anyone. Because when you're only making $6 million,
right,
that's insane.
Yeah, it's pretty bizarre. I don't think it's that expensive, and especially with a team like San Francisco that has the money. That's where I think it's a Mark Davis thing going on there more than anything else. And then a team we know like Chicago has legit money on that as well. But I would definitely think Davante would say, no, we ain't going to that team just yet. So it is what it is for now. But it is weird seeing him stay in Vegas. So another somewhat weird situation, but this one I'm actually more happy that it didn't happen, because to me, this team has flipped an entire 180, and we'll see what run they go on. But I have real high hopes for this team, and we'll talk about it a little bit later too once we start talking about fantasy free agents. But I'm very glad that Derrick Henry did not leave Tennessee. I think now, for me, this is now the thing that I've been hoping for most for Derrick Henry, was play on a team that has a massive deep ball threat. Because if you do that, now Derrick Henry coming out of that backfield is just terrifying. Now you have very few guys in the box. You can't stack the box whatsoever. And now Derrick Henry can just go 100% and do his thing.
Right. Yeah. I didn't really think he was going to get traded just because, like, the money wise and how nobody wants to pay running backs. I don't know. Teams are just kind of weird about that. So I kind of just assumed he was stuck.
Right. And I was hearing reports a few weeks ago that Tennessee was looking to deal him. And then I found out basically on Friday or Saturday that Tennessee said, no, we're gonna keep him. So kind of interesting how Twitter and the internet works, but that's how it works.
Hey, it worked out too. I mean, Will Levis is a stud now.
He is, and can't wait to talk more about that coming up. So yeah, we got some cool stuff going on with Tennessee for sure.
But yeah,
so there you
do you
go.
want to get into some picks?
Oh, totally, man. We got all the trades done. Let's start talking week 9.
Oh wait, do you want to talk about your Raiders in Detroit? I know that's kind of
right,
probably a soft spot.
Yeah, it's a little bit of a soft spot, and totally, man, it feels like that game was a week ago, even though it was just last night. But looking at that, it was pretty cool seeing that Jahmyr Gibbs finally gets to let loose explode. I think now we're starting to see that future of Jahmyr Gibbs really becoming a Christian McCaffrey prototype. And I'm so glad we actually got to see that last night. So Vegas is really thin at the linebacker spot. So it definitely showed where Jahmyr Gibbs can just run into a pile, find one little opening and squeak through it and just run to open field and score a touchdown. That's exactly what he did. And that's something that he can do against teams that are going to be thin like that at the linebacker position. But that's a guy, too, who can also line up in the slot, kind of line up around the field, just like CMC, and do some damage there. So I like seeing that. I like seeing some more production out of Sam Laporta. He's turned out to be one of the best tight ends in the entire NFL as a rookie. Love seeing that going on there. I mean, I do hate it that it's against my Raiders, but I think Detroit's got some real good things going on here. And you can't just say that Detroit losing against Baltimore really kind of knocks them back. Well, it turns out every NFC team in the ever against Lamar Jackson has lost every single game but one. So everyone gets torched against Lamar Jackson for the first time. It's weird. It's something you're not used to. It's totally different, and so be it. But to me, when I really look at the NFC, there's 4 teams that I put at the top of the list. And honestly, I think yeah.
Don't do that list. Well,
okay.
That's a teaser for later.
That's a teaser for later. But we'll just say Detroit's a really great looking team. And I'm glad that a few weeks ago I already put some bets on them to go the distance. So we'll leave it at that.
So to add on to the Davante Adams thing, another reason that someone should have been at least respectful in the front office to move him to a contender.
Yeah.
Especially with this small contract that he has for these first couple of years.
Yep.
So Jimmy Garoppolo is washed. He's done.
He's the worst quarterback in the NFL.
Yeah.
Easily.
His QBR was 3.
Okay. I didn't know that was possible, but learn something new every day here at Db8 Sports. So that's no debate. How about that? But I'll even make it worse. And this I saw while watching the Colin Cowherd show today, that this is why Jimmy Garoppolo is the worst quarterback in the NFL. Clearly, he leads the NFL in interceptions. But what's even worse is the frequency at how often he throws interceptions. So right now, I want to say the rate at guys throwing picks is about once every 300 plays-ish, I want to say. And granted, this list does have Patrick Mahomes and Josh Allen pretty high up on it as well, alongside of Jimmy Garoppolo. But Jimmy Garoppolo's rate at throwing an interception is once every 100-ish throws. So it's bad. And when you're overthrowing Davante Adams multiple times, once deep in the game and then once at the start of the game in the end zone, and you can kind of tell Davante just kind of quits. He's not going to ball out and really risk injury on a really poorly thrown ball from Jimmy Garoppolo. And it shows. But when you're that deep into the territory and you're throwing a pick in the end zone, and he did this in another game not too long ago before his concussion, it just shows that he's done. He's washed. And for a guy that is like that and came from San Francisco, came from New England, did some good things, I don't get it. It's bizarre, but he is clearly not the future. And like you said about Green Bay, this is a reflection of the entire franchise. It's a reflection of the owner. It's a reflection of the GM, the head coach, and the quarterback.
Yeah, agreed. Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yep.
Yeah.
So that's it, man. That's it for Monday night. I mean, I am excited about Detroit, but I am not excited about my Raiders, man. It's well, I love them, but it's a bummer seeing that that's the direction of the franchise.
Makes sense. Well, who do you got for let's see. What's our first game this week? I
Sure.
want to say it's a Thursday game.
It is a Thursday game. They are still doing
Tennessee at
those.
Pittsburgh.
Yeah, pretty bizarre here. Even more bizarre is the consensus. So we have a consensus of 57 on Pittsburgh with pretty much no quarterback. You have a really banged up Kenny Pickett, and we just know Mitch Trubisky is just not good at playing football. And on top of that, your spread of this game is looking like 2.5 points in favor of Pittsburgh. But speaking of everything we just talked about with Derrick Henry and the Titans, that team is awesome. And how about getting this kind of softball toss to play against on Thursday night? And a guy who has very little tape on him whatsoever in Will Levis. I would love to see Tennessee just throw it up and really, really ball out this game against Pittsburgh. This is something they've never seen before.
Yeah, Pittsburgh's rankings when you look at it defensively, they're stacked, but like offensively, they're like the worst team in the NFL. So
exactly. If they can't keep the ball on offense, they're going to stay on defense on the field more often than they want to. And like my Raiders on Monday night, I mean, you can be a good defense, but if you're out there for 40 minutes in a game, you're going to be bad.
Yeah, they are the fourth worst scoring offense in the NFL, only putting up 16 points a game. Tennessee has enough weapons on offense that makes you score.
Oh yeah.
You have to score a little bit against them. And I just don't see this going very well for Pittsburgh.
Yeah, I think the only never mind. Yeah, I mean, I was thinking about that. Like, man, Tennessee has a good receiver outside in Nick Westbrook-Akine. They have DeAndre Hopkins, who's awesome in the slot. Do they have another outside receiver? And then I realized, oh yeah, they got Treylon Burks. He's a guy who's kind of that A.J. Brown kind of style of a player that if he can really get that going with Will Levis, man, they got something there in Tennessee for sure.
Right. I agreed.
Cool.
Let's see. Next game here on my list is going to be our Sunday game, Miami at Kansas City, technically.
Yeah, Miami at Kansas City, technically, even though I believe this game is flat out in Frankfurt, Germany. Yeah, so this is an early morning game in Germany. I like it. And yeah, I really think Miami is going to light it up. I think this is their time to do what they do best. And if I think this works out real nicely because we know a Spagnuolo defense loves to bring the pressure, and then Miami's just going to run it. They're going to go into this game plan with a ton of play action, I think. Put Tua under center as much as they can, and then just have Raheem Mostert run at him with a head full of steam. And I think that's what's really going to screw up Kansas City in this game.
Yeah. I don't know. Kansas City's, especially like their offense is just not where it should be.
Nope.
And you're talking about the most explosive offense in the game. I don't think Kansas City's going to be able to keep up. Definitely going Miami there.
And if Jalen Ramsey took that one ball that he intercepted to the house last week, you know Patrick Mahomes is going to throw another dead duck of some kind like that in his vicinity. So I don't know if it gets taken to the house, but I definitely see another Pat Mahomes dead duck being thrown at some point in this game. Whatever thing it is you want to bet on, take Pat Mahomes for at least one interception for sure.
Boom. That makes
no debate.
Sense. I agree. Look at that. We're on the same page.
Stride and stride. This is weird. We are, Triggs. That's hand in hand, pal. That's how we do it.
And I feel like this one's going to be the same. Atlanta and Minnesota.
So Atlanta and Minnesota, you have a complete change at quarterback in Minnesota. You still have a banged up Justin Jefferson. You have a weird changing of the guards there. Josh Dobbs ain't going to be ready. Ain't going to be ready in 1 week. So for that reason, I'm going to go with Taylor Heineke. I like that defense of Atlanta. I love how the run game now is fully healthy. I like Atlanta in this game.
So this game is so strange. So both teams give up about 20 points a game for defense. Offensively, like Minnesota, puts up like 2 or 3 more points per game than Atlanta does. But then you got to knock that down just because you don't know who's going to be out there for Minnesota. Right. And so, like, I'm leaning Atlanta just because of the question mark with Minnesota's quarterback.
Yeah, I think there's definitely a saving grace to Minnesota that now Cam Akers is being more integrated into this offense after what he did on Sunday. But this game is kind of being reflected as a pick'em from the consensus. But yet the spread is fairly heavy in the favor of Atlanta. It's 4.5. I could see this being one of those weird tight games at the end. But then again, if it's Taylor Heineke for the entire stretch of this game, I think that really sets up Atlanta to do some positive things in this game. And then you're asking Minnesota to put a ton of weight of that offense on both TJ Hawkinson and Cam Akers. And I just don't think that's good enough. You really have to have some chemistry with your tight end and your quarterback to really make that happen.
Well, speaking of Minnesota's quarterback, Arizona at Cleveland.
Hey, former Arizona quarterback. And yeah, that's not the team you want to run into after trading away your quarterback if you're Arizona. So that defense of Cleveland is terrifying. And it just feels like this is the perfect, awesome defense against the terrible defense of Arizona, a good offense in Cleveland against a rough offense in Arizona. Yeah, the spread in this game is pretty heavy. It's like 7.5, but the consensus is about 60-40 for Cleveland. So I'm going to go with Cleveland.
How is it 60-40? You're talking about Cleveland, who's the number one in pass yards allowed and total yards allowed, and Arizona doesn't have a quarterback. So, like,
yeah, exactly. And I'm looking at there's at least 2 other games I'm looking at that are picked significantly higher than Cleveland. And to me, they're both kind of suspect. And we'll talk about these games once we hit them for sure.
So the Rams at the Packers.
So the Rams at the Packers, this is one that is heavily favored to one side, but I do not disagree with this one, unlike Cleveland. This one is almost 70-30 for the Rams. And I see LA definitely having a bounce back game after playing against Dallas, maybe barring some crazy weather up in Green Bay. But I think really losing Rasul Douglas is a major factor against Green Bay's secondary. So now LA can both throw and run against that team, and that's not good.
Yeah. So the Packers give up about 20 points a game. The Rams score 22 points a game, and the Packers don't. So
they ain't scoring points. Rams. They ain't scoring points, and at least one of those running backs on LA is going to have a day.
Yeah. That one hurts a little bit. Washington at New England.
Washington at New England. So now we're looking at a Washington team that now has lost Chase Young, Chase Young and Montez Sweat against a New England team that can sometimes light it up and sometimes not. Man, this is a weird one. This game is at New England. It's about a 60-40 split in favor of Washington. Man, this is a real tough one. I do like the way Washington is starting to come back with the way that offense, is looking. You got Jamison Crowder, who's playing more of a role in this offense. I like it. I think the fact that New England is struggling on offense like they usually do, and I think there's still some hope that Washington can figure it out. To have Sam Howell throw for almost 400 yards and 4 touchdowns last week, I think that carries over, and I'll take Washington.
So here's a fun stat for you. even with the pass rushers that they got rid of, Washington was giving up the second most points in the NFL, only behind or in front of the Indianapolis Colts. So
Yep.
I can't trust Washington. So I got to go New
Fair.
England.
That's totally fair, and I can see it, but I also see how if New England struggles, then that keeps Washington on the field for a lot longer. A team that can both run the ball and throw the ball fairly well. So if they can figure out that offensive line, that team really should be pretty tough to beat.
That makes sense. That makes sense.
Yep.
Let's see. Next is Chicago at New Orleans.
Chicago at New Orleans. So again, Chicago made some additions on defense. This is at New Orleans. You're really starting to get some good chemistry out of Derek Carr and Rashid Shaheed. And I think this is one of those things too, like seeing more of the downfall of the Raiders, I think is probably even inspiring Derek Carr to play even better now moving forward. So I think this is a team that he beats up on. Chicago's got a bad secondary. And that's where I'm going to stick with this. I think Marshawn Lattimore absolutely locks down DJ Moore. So, yeah, I'm going New Orleans in this game.
So Chicago is one of the worst passing offenses in the league, and New Orleans has the 7th-ranked pass defense. So, yeah, definitely going New Orleans.
Yeah. Crazy that this game is only a 55-45 split.
That's insane. Seattle at Baltimore. This will be a fun game.
Yeah, so Seattle at Baltimore, this is definitely a fun one. And considering how Baltimore is always one of those teams where you get some weird stuff here and there where sometimes they look great, other times they look questionable. I think Seattle is more of a complete team. I think these teams do mirror each other quite a bit. So for that fact, I'm going to take Seattle.
Oh, okay. Hey, look at that. We differ on this one. Every time that Baltimore it's kind of looked past, they just beat up on whoever they're playing. Sure. They are the 3rd best rush offense in the NFL. And hey, Seattle gives up they're a pretty solid team against the run. But I think that power of Lamar Jackson doing his thing, especially inside the pocket, the way he's been doing it. I know you just said that NFC teams are not very good against Lamar Jackson.
Sure.
So I got to go Baltimore.
Yeah, and my reasoning with that is Seattle is one of the one teams that pretty much for the last decade has had a kind of mobile quarterback at that position. So they do know how to defend against it, especially in practice. So I think them with Geno Smith is not all that different against Lamar Jackson. He does have that added element, but I still think they're just overall athleticism now and how they're playing the position. They're both playing the position at top notch. So I like that.
That makes sense. We got Tampa Bay at Houston.
Boy, Tampa Bay looks awful. They are just an awful looking team. I know Houston lost a tough one against Carolina, but Carolina's got a sneaky defense. So now I think you put Houston back indoors on their racetrack, and I see CJ Stroud coming back into play, and that Texans defense is just going to absolutely smother Baker Mayfield. So I like Houston in this one.
It's a great way to put it. I couldn't have said it better myself. Tampa Bay is the 5th worst passing defense in the NFL. So yeah, CJ Stroud's he's gonna bounce back.
Absolutely, I like it.
I don't like that we're agreeing on all these games except 2. This is kind of weird.
Yeah, we'll see. We got some more games to get to. We'll see what happens.
Well, I really don't think you're gonna pick Carolina in this one. So it's Indy at Carolina.
Oh no, not a chance. That is definitely not going to happen. Indianapolis is a crazy explosive team right now, and they are way better than Houston is offensively, just in terms of consistency. So and having that balanced attack. So I think Indy can now start to pick apart teams both in the passing game and the run game. Whereas when Carolina just played against Houston, it's pretty much CJ Stroud. So that's what they focused on. They made it happen. But now Indianapolis is just going to be way too overbearing. Seeing just a little bit of Dameon Pierce to now seeing both Zach Moss and Jonathan Taylor, That's too much for them.
So I'm going to contradict myself just a tad bit here.
Okay.
Excuse me. So these are two of the worst defenses in the NFL. Six.
Okay.
So they are literally like the bottom two. Believe it or not, Indianapolis gives up the most points in the NFL, and Carolina gives up the third most points. But if you flip offensively, Indianapolis scores the sixth most points, and Carolina does not. So
and I think Carolina probably still actually does have a good defense from the Steve Wilkes regime. But when your offense is so miserable and can't stay on the field, now those stats get skewed to making Carolina look as bad as they look. So that's where I feel that is not necessarily true. We've all heard that pretty much at the end of the day, these teams, for the most part, are fairly close to each other because they are the elite of the elite in the world. So I think this is more of a reflection of how bad that offense is for Carolina.
That could be true, but they both give up a lot of points.
They do. They totally do. I think Indianapolis, legitimately, if we take out the offensive factor, I think Indianapolis is a legit bad defense. I don't necessarily think that Carolina is a bad defense if they could actually muster up some offensive production.
Yeah, understandable. Let's see here. We have the Giants at the Raiders.
Yeah, so this is a really weird one. This is one of those two games that I spotted where the consensus is so much higher than the Cleveland Arizona matchup. The consensus is 70-30 in favor of Vegas. And I've seen this team just not even play against a completely incompetent offense in Chicago. And I really don't see much difference between Chicago and the Giants now. And hopefully they stick with Tyrod Taylor. But that being the case, they have some nice things going on in the receiver position. Now they have a week to figure out what's going on without Darren Waller. And I mean, ultimately, the worst quarterback in the NFL is Jimmy Garoppolo. So I know they traded away the defensive player from the Giants to the Seahawks, but I still think they got it up going on over there. The thing that is weird about this is that this is the team that the defensive coordinator for the Raiders came from a couple years ago when the regime change happened with Vegas. So I do wonder if that plays a factor, especially if Daniel Jones is quarterback. Do we know who the quarterback for the Giants will be for this game?
No idea. No idea.
Let's take a look, because it's pretty bizarre seeing such a heavy spread or a heavy consensus on Vegas, yet the spread is only 2.5 points.
So while you're looking that up, I'll break it down from the numbers standpoint.
Sure.
The Giants are the worst scoring offense in the NFL. They score 11 points a game.
We're not far ahead of them, though. I can tell you that.
You're not. They are the worst, and you're the third worst.
Oh, that's good to know.
But you score 5 more points than they do. That's how bad they are.
Yeah, it's rough.
I can't in good faith pick the worst scoring offense in the NFL. So I am definitely going Raiders.
Boy, this is a tough one. Considering Vegas held on to all of their components and the Giants kind of put up a fire sale, even to the point that there's no Tyrod Taylor and now it is Daniel Jones. That is concerning. And I think everything is all right from Marcus Peters for the Raiders against Detroit. I know he left that game, but from what I've found out, it seemed like Peters had to use the bathroom and not really have an injury whatsoever. Oh. So I think that's exactly what's going on there. I think that defense for Vegas, that secondary, is real good. And I don't know. We'll see how much they commit to Saquon Barkley. I would think Brian Daboll really wants to sling it. But, man, this is tough because really the identity of both these teams is to stop throwing the ball, and they both need to run the ball more. Man, oh man, this is tough. Yeah, all right. It hurts, and we'll see if it happens, but I'll go with the Raiders. It hurts. I love my Raiders, but man, they are playing so bad right now. It's rough.
I almost thought that I was going to go against the Packers and you were going to go against the Raiders.
Almost.
It didn't happen.
Close. I mean, we had to talk about it, man. If I was going to go into this just betting on my phone without talking about it, I think I would bet the Giants. But now that you and I discussed it and made some sense out of nonsense, yeah, I'll take the Raiders.
See, this is how I thought about it. So the Packers are like literally the one of the worst offenses, but we score more points per game than the Giants do. And I watched the Raiders basically just pick the Packers apart. So I was like, yeah, probably a good idea.
Okay. Yeah, that's fair. The thing that I just don't like seeing, I saw Detroit do this again yesterday, is that teams are realizing do not run in the direction of Max Crosby. Whatever you can do, get the ball quick and go away from wherever he's lined up. And I saw Jahmyr Gibbs do that, and I saw the running backs for the Bears do it. I would think Saquon Barkley is definitely going to do that as well.
You know, it's fun. The Packers couldn't figure that out.
They could not figure that out. Not at all. Nope.
So, actually, fun stat while you're still looking up that quarterback info, the Raiders are the worst rush offense in the NFL, and the Giants are the worst pass offense in the NFL.
Oh, gosh.
So, you got like the two of the worst offenses out there.
Yeah, and actually, I found out. Yeah,
it is the two exact worst offenses total yardage. The Giants are last, and the Raiders are second.
Yeah, it totally speaks for itself, man. It's totally wild. But yeah, I definitely get the feeling that. Well, I did my little research, and it turns out that Daniel Jones will be starting in this game. I take it that Tyrod Taylor's still banged up. I think it's a rib injury. So that's probably going to take a week or two to heal up if it's not too extreme. And we'll see if he's going to be ready after that. I would think Brian Dable at this point wants to go Tyrod Taylor, but he's got to go with who he's got. So it's going to be Daniel Jones. I think them not having Darren Waller is going to be a major factor in this game because it's unlike Detroit having Sam Laporta. So now the fact that there's no Darren Waller kind of takes away that X factor. So that changes up things and makes it a little easier for Vegas. They can probably stack the box a little bit more than they want to, or than they did against Detroit.
Makes sense. All right. Next is actually probably going to be a couple solid games here. We got Dallas at Philly.
Dallas at Philly. This is an interesting one. There is a heavy consensus on Philadelphia on this game. And I like it as well. I just think Philadelphia at home has a totally different mojo, especially at home against an opponent like Dallas. I think that is really going to get in their heads. And I still need to see more out of Dak. I don't get how he went from being this not good quarterback and obviously has had major arm injuries over the last few seasons to now just lighting up teams with literally only CeeDee Lamb and not utilizing Tony Pollard. I don't get it. And I think this week they kind of fall back to reality and regress on that.
Yeah, I'm with you there. Dallas is like they're a tough nut to crack. Both teams offensively do damage in their own way. Philly a lot more through the pass and the run. Dallas more so with the run than the pass. I'm just gonna take Philly just because they're at home.
Right.
Yeah, that's what I got. Philly at home.
And the ironic thing is, if Dallas does the exact same thing they did last week, they should win because Philly is such a terrible secondary. They are a great front line against the rush. And Dallas did both of that last week. They did not run the ball, and they went just heavy in the air. So this could line up really well for Dallas if the crowd noise doesn't get to them and if they don't get on tilt and whatnot. But I just don't think we're going to see this consistency out of Dak. And I think really, if you're Philly, you're like, all right, we got a bad secondary. Okay, what should we focus on? Focus on CeeDee Lamb. If you have to double cover CeeDee Lamb all game, do it. You already have a bad secondary. So at least take that piece out and make it Jake Ferguson and a bunch of other receivers that aren't too well known. Make them be the pieces that take you down.
Yeah, and that's the thing with Philly. Philly is the number one defense against the run. And so if they make it to where Dak Prescott has to be a quarterback and throw the ball a lot, Dallas is in trouble.
Totally, man. Totally. It hurts me being a Tony Pollard owner, but I know this is a week that you don't go Tony Pollard against that defense.
Yeah, 10-4. Buffalo at Cincinnati.
Buffalo at Cincinnati. So, granted, this is definitely the matchup where we all know about the Damar Hamlin issue, but I think Cincinnati now is playing some of the best football in the entire league. And for a team like Buffalo that's very inconsistent, very hit and miss, maybe if this game was at Buffalo, it's a different story. But this game is at Cincinnati, and Cincinnati is kind of that team in the league that feels that it's us against the world. And what better way to do that than against the Buffalo Bills and Josh Allen? And again, I have this theory that against Cincinnati, that if they get ahead of you, especially a good 10 points, I don't think they can be caught. I think with the way that Joe Burrow is playing with T. Higgins and that bunch, now we're seeing more of Joe Mixon in this offense like we should be seeing. I think that's the way to make it work. I forgot who their tight end is. I think it's Irv Smith, the former Viking. He already looks better than Hayden Hurst did in this offense last year as well. So I love how that added dimension in this offense is starting to come together. And it's a short list of guys in the NFL who I would definitely be afraid of going up against. Joe Burrow is one of those three. The other is Justin Herbert. And the third, I'm going to save for later.
Oh, we got ourselves a tease.
We have a real tease.
So with me, Buffalo is just they're so middle of the pack in just about every aspect of the game. And just like you said, Cincinnati's one of the worst rush offenses in the league. But I think that was because Joe Burrow was hurt and they were stacking the box to make Joe Burrow throw at the time. Now you can't do that. And Joe Mixon, that he was running all over the place before with Joe Burrow slinging it. So I think any running back out there that they have can kind of mix it up a lot more when Joe Burrow's healthy. So I got to go Cincinnati too.
Yeah, totally. This is definitely a team that is looking solid. They have swept the entire NFC West. That's no small feat, man. Granted, maybe Arizona, you can be like, all right, cool, that's a gimme. But to take down the other three teams of the NFC West, and you are 4-3 now, that's impressive. I really give them a lot of credit for that. And this will be a tough matchup for them, but I think they definitely get this done. Consensus on this game is about 2/3 on Cincy, 1/3 on Buffalo. It's a tight spread of 2.5 in favor of Cincy, but this game's at home too. And considering how this team feels, they've been wronged from the way that Damar Hamlin game went against them. For some odd reason, the way the playoff schedule makers did this, Cincinnati really had the wrong end of that stick. So I think they really want to put some payback against Buffalo.
Nice. And last but not least, the Monday night game, the Chargers at the Jets.
The Chargers at the Jets. Yeesh. Yeah, this is definitely the other one of the three quarterbacks I fear in Justin Herbert. Definitely not Zach Wilson. And the biggest thing going on here, and you know this firsthand, Austin Eckler is that added dimension. He is that player that you bring him into the fold and make him do his thing, and that run game takes off. This team should almost be unbeatable. They do some weird, screwy things on defense. They give up a lot of points, but they ain't giving up a lot of points to the Jets.
So are you picking the Chargers?
Oh, absolutely. I am absolutely picking the Chargers this game.
Yes, we finally differ again. All right, there we go.
All right.
So unless Eckler comes back and he is healthy and ready to go, and like himself, the Jets are the number 5 pass defense in the NFL. So if the Chargers have to throw it a lot, the Jets might actually be the perfect team to slow that down. So I got to go Jets.
However, this last game that I just saw the Chargers play, who was Herbert slinging it to? Eckler.
Mm-hmm.
So you're going to have to do it way more out of the backfield and the slot, more Quentin Johnson, more Austin Eckler, more 12 personnel with Donald Parham and maybe a Gerald Everett if he's healthy. But that's the recipe for success. Not Quentin Johnson, Keenan Allen. So I think that's the way that this is the way for the Chargers is to utilize Keenan Allen, the tight ends, and Austin Eckler. And that might be the way that they should win every game, as they should. And I think this definitely does it against the Jets because if you realize Mike Williams is gone, neutralize Josh Palmer, neutralize Quentin Johnson. I don't think that matches up well then for the Jets. Those are not against most teams, yes, but this is a team that just dominates the slot, and that is definitely where the Jets secondary is the weakest. So I think this is matching up extremely well for LA.
Nice. All right. Well, time for the greatest segment of all time.
Oh, yeah.
It's 5 up for no debate.
The
best segment ever.
By far, yes.
In the so far, I like that. Usually we ask you 5 different questions and we get some answers from Steve Metrics, but not today. Today, it's mid-season rankings. You're going to give me your top 5 AFC teams and your top 5 NFC teams.
Gotcha.
Boom.
Interesting. Boom. And it's pretty cool you talk about this. Again, I spent a fair portion of my day eating lunch and seeing Colin Cowherd's show. And I was hoping to get some inside scoop on some of these trades that were going down. But while I was watching that, he also put up his top 5 teams in the top 10 teams in the entire NFL. Oh. And it was interesting. There were things that I noticed that were somewhat mainstream, but then there were some things where he called his shot, and man, he was on Cincinnati a month ago before we were. And I mean, maybe you were more on Cincinnati. I definitely was not, but things have definitely changed there in the AFC. So with that, yeah, let's totally do that. Let's go with I don't know. I want to tease that. We'll go to the AFC next. I think the NFC is a little more well known with who is probably the better teams. So let's go with that. And I don't know who my number 5 team is, the NFC, quite yet. But let's definitely just start at number 1. And I think the number 1 team in the NFC, and they're starting to get into their groove. They're getting guys back. And I like what I keep seeing out of this team moving forward. They really don't have a glaring question mark in either side of the ball. So I like Detroit. I really like Detroit as the number 1 team in the NFC. Just everything lining up with them playing so many games indoors towards the end of the season. I think this is a team that's going on a trajectory that has positive progression that can only get better. This is the team that I think does end up coming out of the NFC for the Super Bowl. The only other team that I think that is really going to give that a run for the money, well, actually, there's a few teams, but I think the number 2 team for sure, once they get healthy, is San Francisco.
Wait. Let me give my number 1 team, and we'll go back and forth.
Yeah, totally.
My number 1 team is actually the Philadelphia Eagles until someone stops them from being the number 1 team.
Okay. That's fair. That is totally fair. I just, I don't get what's going on in this secondary. I mean, I was expecting that the Kevin Byard trade, and granted, it's only been 1 week, but I was expecting that trade would make them even better in the secondary, not regress. And I didn't like seeing that. But maybe it does positive progression this week. We'll see what happens. But they do have a ton of weapons. That team is so scary, especially if Julio Jones really starts to make his impact more often in the slot. I know he had very few catches, but he did have a touchdown this past weekend. So having a team that has both AJ Brown and Julio Jones, and then the speed threat in Davante Smith, that's scary, man. That is pretty scary, and that's why I have the Eagles as my number 3 team there. I know I jumped the gun.
Okay, that's fine. Your number. Who is your number 2?
My number 2 team is San Francisco. Regardless of how they look now, I feel like later in the season they will get back Deebo Samuel. They will have their left tackle soon. And granted, they added these pieces on defense. I think that's a scary, scary looking team. And they're going to be a multifaceted team on how they can attack you. So I really do like San Francisco for those reasons.
All right. See, I have San Francisco at number 2 just because, I mean, even with Brock Purdy back there and people not believing him, Christian McCaffrey is probably the most dynamic weapon in the league besides Tyreek Hill, and he's in the other conference.
Yep, totally. That's exactly what's doing it, and I think San Francisco is a great team, so I like that. And then, you know I have Philadelphia at 3 for those reasons. So who you got at 3?
The Seattle Seahawks. They are doing everything the right way. Plus, they have San Francisco in their division, and they're right at the top of the league. Technically, they are leading the division right now.
Interesting with that skid on San Francisco. That's bringing Seattle to the front.
Yep. Who you got at number 4?
Number 4, I'm going to take that page out of your book. I am going to go Seattle as well. I like the way that this team is a very complete team top to end on that roster. I like the moves that they just made on defense, but even more, I love seeing what's going on with Jackson Smith and Jigba in the slot. This is a team that, even going back to the Russell Wilson era, has pretty much always been a 2 wideout oriented team. Now the fact that they can do this with Tyler Lockett, DK Metcalf, and Jackson Smith and Jigba, on top of having a fairly good tight end, whoever it is, and always having that consistent run game, I like what's going on with Seattle for sure.
Nice. My number 4 is the Dallas Cowboys. No matter how much they get overhyped, they always consistently stay at the top of the conference. They're doing pretty well on offense. They're starting to get their stuff going back in there. They'll get there at some point. And besides Philly and the NFC East, it's kind of just them.
Yeah, this is definitely an interesting one with Dallas. Man, it's weird. I definitely have a tough time excluding Dallas, but at the same time, I mean, I think it's close. And I think for those reasons, you have to go with Dallas. And if really they kind of keep figuring out things with Dak, then I think at some point it has to translate with Tony Pollard. And that defense, that secondary, they got it. They got guys. They're losing guys, and they can still play well. So I like what's going on with Dallas. I put them at 5. I still think they're going to run into some buzzsaw after the wild card round, whoever it is. But that's why I put them at 5, because I think they'll probably win their first round and then immediately get knocked out by one of those other 4 teams that we like.
Yep, that's the plan. And then obviously my number 5 is the Detroit Lions.
Okay.
I don't know. Last year they got into the playoffs by the skin of their teeth, and then they just got pummeled. And I think this year they're kind of in that luck of the draw kind of thing. Green Bay's horrible, Chicago's horrible, and Minnesota's pretty horrible, and they lost their quarterback. So I think Detroit's just squeaking along because they can.
I don't even think of Detroit at this point as part of the NFC North. I think of them as the Brigham Young or the Notre Dame. I think of them as an independent playing in the National Football League. They are basically without a conference. The rest of the conference is garbage, to be honest, at this point. I thought Minnesota could definitely make a run on it and probably even win it. But losing Kirk Cousins changes everything. It completely changes everything in that dynamic. So now it is Detroit's for the win. I was seeing some pretty heavy spreads on San Francisco to run away with the NFC West. Obviously, now that has shrunk. But I think Detroit now has to be just the hands-down favorite. I was seeing like minus 500 within a few weeks ago. I would think now at this point, it's got to be, with the Kirk Cousins news, it's got to be above negative 1,000. I think Detroit is such a lock to win the North that they are for sure the greatest lock to win their division in the NFL now.
Yeah, to me, they're like I like that independent. I was thinking of them more of like an other, like they're not in the Power 5 conferences. They're just kind of like
Cincinnati.
Yeah, like a Cincinnati. There you are, Louisville or something like that.
Or Tulane.
Tulane. Wow.
Yeah. Hey, Tulane's good, man. Shout out to Tyjae Spears, who we talked about earlier. Shout out to Tulane.
So who's your number one team in the AFC?
So my number one team in the AFC, and this is kind of where I kind of revamped my Super Bowl pick from earlier in the preseason. Now I think the number one team, getting back some pieces on defense within Xavier Rhodes and Jalen Ramsey, I think that's secondary, and now Vic Fangio is starting to play more of a part in this. I think the Miami Dolphins are the team. As long as they have Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle out there, and they have a very solid backfield, whoever is carrying the rock, I think they can do it between Jeff Wilson, Raheem Mostert, Devin Achane. I think this team's scary. And I think they can do it regardless who is at quarterback, as long as that quarterback can throw the deep ball. That's why I like Miami as the number one team in the AFC, possibly even the entire NFL.
Nice. So, believe it or not, I'm still with the team that I picked at the beginning. Because they're the number 3 pass defense in the NFL, I think they can actually slow Miami down somehow.
Sure.
The Baltimore Ravens are my number one team.
There you go.
Not only does the record say it, but like I said, their defense is pretty stacked.
Totally, man. Totally. Yeah, they are pretty stacked. Kind of odd seeing them struggle against Arizona. And I still see this weirdness out of them. I don't know what it is. I wish they weren't this way. I wish, too, that this was a team that actually had a big threat at wide receiver like a Davante Adams. I think that team needs it. I think they need a Mark Andrews, and then they need another big piece complementing him for Lamar Jackson. I think that's really going to make his life easier moving forward, instead of having these speed threats / pseudo speed threats. And basically what I noticed from this game against Arizona, they need to run the ball effectively to win. If they cannot run the ball, I don't think they're going to get there. And I wonder what teams they're going to come across that are in the playoffs that can do that. And we'll see. I mean, we still got half the season to go, but yeah, I got to think about it, but I don't have Baltimore. I know all these stats, all these metrics are looking good for Baltimore, but still seeing this weird stuff out of Baltimore more consistently than I want to see, I don't like. So for that reason, my number 2 team is Jacksonville. I love how this team is improving moving forward. I don't like seeing this stuff in the secondary, but we talked about it yesterday. I think they got a pretty tough schedule against some pretty good offenses going up against them. So I think that's part of that. But I do love what's going on with Travis Etienne now. Evan Ingram, again, is still dominant at tight end, and all the receiver components getting better at the offensive line, getting less pressure on Trevor Lawrence, getting more confidence with that guy. I truly think that the team in the Super Bowl from the AFC will either be Miami or Jacksonville.
So just to go back on that, so my number 2 team is Miami. But just to go back on Baltimore, do you know they have the number 1 point differential in the NFL? They're the 7th. They score the 7th most points, and they give up the least amount of points.
That's wild. That is pretty wild. And definitely what they did against Detroit is a definite statement. That is legit.
Yeah, I just wanted to throw that in there. We all know what
Totally.
Miami does. I was
Totally.
like, let me throw this Baltimore in there.
Totally.
But who's your third team?
I think the third team, and I think now you're starting to convince me on it. I think the third team
Yes.
has to be Baltimore now.
Let's go.
And yeah, I mean, I am concerned what's going to happen more in the postseason here, but I got to see more out of it. But I do think Baltimore is that team. They're better than every team in the AFC West. I'll give them that. They are better than almost, yeah. And that's where the other two divisions, it gets weird. So for that reason, why I think they're better than every team in the AFC West, I'm definitely going to put Baltimore at 3 then.
That's completely understandable. So, let's see. My number 3 team is the Kansas City Chiefs. They sit atop the standings right now, and until someone knocks them off, I can't say they're
Like
not
Miami.
good.
Miami will do that.
I put them at number 2 already, so
I know.
I got to give the best record technically in the league, or in the AFC at least. I got to give them their credit, their due. So I put them at number 3.
Yeah, I'm not going to put Kansas City anywhere in this top 5. I think this is a completely Travis Kelce oriented team, and that's not winning football. This is only halfway through the season, and already Mahomes is struggling and can't score a touchdown against the bad secondary of the Denver Broncos. And 2 weeks ago, before this, he also had a somewhat questionable game against Denver as well. And that's a bad secondary. So their schedule is definitely going to get stronger after this Miami game, and even Miami is a not so easy game to play against. So for me, when it comes to number 4, I'm going to go back into the AFC North. Boy, this is interesting. I think this is how I'm going to stack my final 3 picks of the AFC. And for number 4, I'm going to go at this point. I'm going to go Cincinnati. I think Cincinnati is really starting to turn it on. And I think, too, that this is a team, when they get ahead of anyone, I don't think they lose. Maybe the one team who can really spoil that is Miami, maybe Jacksonville. But I think other than that, I just don't think anyone can be trailing Cincinnati and come back to win a game. I think they're just way too stacked.
For me, number 4 is going to be the Jacksonville Jaguars.
Okay.
I mean, you've already said enough about them, but they are a top 10 scoring defense. Their offense is starting to click on all cylinders and putting up points on both sides of or putting up points on offense, putting up or not giving up points on defense. Like, that's a plan for success. So they are my number 4.
Gotcha. At number 5, you know how much I love the Cleveland Browns, but there's something weird going on at quarterback there, and I think losing Nick Chubb is definitely going to play a part as well. So I think this offense is not going to be on the field as much as I'd like them to. So I'm actually going to leave Cleveland out. They're probably my 6. At number 5, again, teams that are scary, teams that are starting to figure it out and turn it on and have some of the scarier quarterbacking in the NFL. I think I really think the LA Chargers got something.
I thought you were about to say Tennessee.
I was close. And again, I am thinking about it. And again, I almost want to take out Baltimore and put Tennessee in this. That's how much I like this team. And when it comes to scare factor, yeah, Tennessee is my 3rd team in the scare factor for sure right now. But considering how LA had so many games at the start of the season where basically they were giving up almost 100 points in 3 weeks, like, that's wild. And I think that's going to change. I think that gets better over time, I hope. But now seeing Austin Eckler in this offense, seeing things work out, I think LA, you put them in the playoffs, that's a team no one wants to see round 1. No one wants to go up against Justin Herbert and that loaded offense week 1.
Okay. So I'm going to pop back to my number 4 with Jacksonville.
Sure.
One of the big reasons I picked Jacksonville is they have the most takeaways in the NFL.
Yep.
And that's actually why I picked my number 5 team, which for me is the Cincinnati Bengals. The Cincinnati Bengals have the second least amount of giveaways, and they have the best differential for takeaways and giveaways in the NFL.
Sure.
That's a recipe for success.
It is. And it really makes us feel that I think somehow, some way that division is going to get 3 teams into the playoffs. I like Baltimore, at least 2 for sure, between Baltimore and Cincinnati. Can they get Cleveland? Can they figure it out at quarterback? I think they can, but they've been very, I don't know what the word is exactly, but they've been giving way too many points up on defense as well recently. So I feel that is a reflection that the offense isn't staying on the field as much as it should. And maybe even then, when it comes to me, maybe I even bump them back to 7. And I think Tennessee can go on a sneaky run and find their way into the postseason. I think they take that 7 spot away from the Jets at this point, for sure.
Nice. I can't disagree with that, but who knows?
Yeah, we'll see. Exactly. So there you go.
Yeah. So what do you got for us with fantasy?
Yeah, so fantasy. So looking at some guys to pick up in waivers, and definitely with a guy that I talked about last week, and this one came back to bite me. Definitely one of the better guys that you can get out there that is still available, shouldn't be available in our league. I dropped the ball. We all dropped the ball in our league. Rashid Shaheed. 2 weeks ago, he had 8 targets from Derek Carr. And in this past game with only 3, he had over 150 and a touchdown. This is a guy that returns both punts and kicks. And you had that production earlier in the season as well. He is absolutely a guy that you need to go out there and get. The other receiver that I liked as well, and he's a player that has had a not so great season for the most part, but now is starting to click because your quarterback is healthy, is T. Higgins. So T. Higgins not ranking the best, but that if Jamar Chase is getting attention, T. Higgins is that number 2 guy to get. So, excuse me. But I like what you can get there. And then some other players that you can get. You can get that Trey McBride in Arizona. I don't know how much you really want to go with him now that Josh Dobbs left and is no longer part of that team. That's going to screw up that chemistry with the tight end, so I'm not as big on that. But it is what it is, and he's out there. So if you need a tight end, maybe you go with him. I think there's some better streamer options out there. We'll get to that. But that's who you can get. Another wide receiver that is interesting, but I would definitely hold off on him this week. I think he's going to be part of this offense and have more of an impact moving forward now that he's getting more acclimated since being a rookie. Quentin Johnson of the LA Chargers. So this is a guy that you might want to pick up and stash a little bit. Granted, it is a matchup against a top-notch secondary outside. So lay off that. Just wait a little bit. Time will come, and it should work out. So I like that there. But now 2 guys. One is a wide receiver. One is a quarterback. And let's kick up the music for this, Triggs. Let's talk about my Bono pick of the week here.
Let him cook. Let him cook. I said let him cook.
Yeah, so my Bono pick of the week and the number 1 waiver pickup that you should be doing in every fantasy league, no matter what, in all honesty, is Will Levis and the Tennessee Titans. This is why both Triggs and myself are now starting to get really high on this team. This team is hot. This is one of the 3 quarterbacks in the NFL that I truly fear after seeing what he did on Sunday and the fact that there is just no tape on this guy. And when it comes to today's NFL, the number 1 factor for a quarterback is probably that scramble ability. But I think what's even more valuable than being a scrambler is being a passer that can throw a deep ball accurately. And Will Levis can absolutely do that. He is better than all of these rookie quarterbacks that we've seen over the last 2 years. Maybe not CJ Stroud. We'll see what happens there. But, man, this guy, Will Levis, is now playing on Thursday at Pittsburgh. Pay attention to the weather. That definitely plays an impact, considering what I saw with this Jacksonville Steelers game this past week. But if this is some nice weather to play outdoors at night, I think you got something here with Will Levis. This is kind of a middle-of-the-road team just in general defensively when it comes to against passing. So we'll see what we got there. But I think this is your guy to go with coming off a 4-touchdown game. You now have DeAndre Hopkins in the mix more with the 3 touchdowns he just scored last week. Nick Westbrook-Akine is in here. And Nick is that other compliment I like. So I feel if you can get Will Levis and you can get an added piece to almost like combo up and double up, whether it's in a daily or whatever league you're playing in, go for Nick Westbrook-Akine. We even saw it back with Ryan Tannehill, was that Tannehill would still find Nick occasionally when the matchups outside really favored him. So I think this continues. I think Will Levis and Nick Westbrook-Akine, that's the combo you want to go with. And Will Levis is flat out my Bono player of the week.
As you're saying that, I'm going to pick him up in a couple leagues that I'm in.
Exactly. He's available in 100% leagues. I don't know if anyone really had the guts to start him. Probably not against that stout secondary of the Atlanta Falcons, but they showed that they had no resistance whatsoever against the deep ball. And the most beautiful thing that I noticed in this game outside of those 3 touchdowns were the one pass that Levis just absolutely torched it downfield. And that at the very last moment, one of those good players in the Falcons secondary just came down at the right point in time to deflect that pass. Otherwise, that would have been another deep pass. And then there was another throw to, I want to say it was Okonkwo on the sideline there, that Okonkwo was just barely stepped too far out of bounds. So that throw was a little off target, but we're talking like a good handful of deep throws. The majority of plays in a game for deep throws, I want to say, is about 2 per team. And we're talking like elite quarterbacks as well. This guy threw like 5, legitimately 5 throws deep. So I like it. We'll see what happens with the playing conditions. Again, this game's at night, so the field will look a little differently. But I really like this guy. I think Will Levis, even if he tanks this game, even if it's not a good game, I think this is a guy that you absolutely have to have because he has such a great deep ball potential. He has the support of the franchise. He has supported Ryan Tannehill since day one of being drafted. And you can tell now that Ryan Tannehill is supporting this guy. So the fact that both these quarterbacks got each other's backs and they really have that teamwork, I think the sky's the limit on Tennessee. And now my favorite part of this too is that now Derrick Henry doesn't have to face a loaded box. You have to respect DeAndre Hopkins, Nick Westbrook-Akine, and Treylon Burks outside. Those are legit receivers. Those are high-end receivers as well when you have a guy who can actually throw the ball deep.
Nice. Yeah, I just went and put the waiver claim in on a couple leagues. One where I had Jordan Love as my starter, and
yeah,
it was Jordan Love was putting up solid points, but nothing like special.
Right. But I mean, like looking at all these quarterbacks who have question marks, I mean, we'll see what happens with the shallow and intermediate passes. But man, it's a short list of guys who can really throw the ball deep and accurately, even though like the guy doesn't have the fantasy numbers or the consistency of doing it in Derek Carr. Derek Carr can throw a crazy good deep ball, and that is scary. That scares teams at the end of the day. So having that, Justin Herbert does what he does. I do agree with you that I think he is the way Herbert's going to have a good day is going to be the yak. It's going to be the yards after the catch. And more often than not, these passes are going to be short. They're going to be intermediate. They're going to be in the backfield. That's how it's going to happen. So you can throw deep balls to Quentin Johnson and Josh Palmer. I don't think so. I don't think that goes well. I think that's how you turn the ball over, and I don't think they want to do that. So I like seeing that there. And and then the only other quarterback that I think that is just terrifying that can scare defense is Joe Burrow. That connection with Jamar Chase, T. Higgins, what they can do. Joe Burrow can just light it up as long as he's healthy. That power that he can put on those feet of his, he's got a ton of power, man. So those are the three quarterbacks that right now that I would just be terrified to play against as a defense.
10-4.
There you go, man.
What else you got for us today?
What else do I got for us, man? I think that's pretty much a wrap, man. I mean, we're looking at everything. We're looking at trades. We're looking at games. We're looking at players. We're doing 5 up for no debate. We got all sorts of good stuff going on here, man. That is a heck of a show. I think it's time we bust out a belt and we bust out some video games.
Boom.
That's a debate.
I'll let you go first. You bring out the belt. Let's see what we got. Since
they've
already talked about your yellow outfit.
Exactly. I like sporting yellow every now and then. It kind of brings back some good vibes for the Bucks, and I hope that alternate comes back because of all the Milwaukee Bucks alternates, the yellow jersey to me is the favorite. It kind of is like a little bit of Lance Armstrong being invincible in the Tour de France, minus the PEDs, but so be it. But I love seeing Milwaukee wear that yellow stuff. And Grant, this is a Golden State Warriors shirt. I had to get it. When I saw the City Edition shirts, I had to get Golden State's and I had to get Milwaukee's. I thought they were the coolest City Editions when they started doing that back around the time of COVID. So good stuff there. But my belt, to get some good vibes coming back to my team because I need it. Like, man, you put a shellacking on my team this week. It was quite the bummer, but we got right the ship and make this better. So I'm going back to my Muppets and my Dr. Teeth and the Electric Mayhem. So that's my fantasy team. Let's get some good play on my Muppets.
Nice. And then I did kind of put a whooping on your team. My fantasy team is starting to like move up a little bit.
Yeah,
so,
they're figuring it out. Yeah, you got some guys.
Go.
Who you got?
I'm putting the Blitz on you.
Oh, that game is great. That is easily one of the greatest arcade games ever, and it is at the top of the N64 games. Of anyone I know that owns an N64, it is Mario 64, it is Mario Kart 64, it is Ocarina of Time, Majora's Mask. Well, it's probably Majora's Mask more than anything because of the collectability of the gold version. But then when it comes to the sports games, it's Blitz, and then I think it's 1080 snowboarding. I think that's your power 5 of the N64. And did I say James Bond GoldenEye? But that should be in there too.
I'm going to disappoint you because I don't have like the majority of those because I'm not a fan.
Okay. That's fair. I know. But man, like if you have the powerhouse of Blitz, Majora's Mask, GoldenEye, Mario 64, and Mario Kart 64, those could be the only video games you own and you're set. Like that is just an awesome group of games.
Well, I have a couple of those.
Okay.
But you are missing what is in the wrestling realm. It is known as the greatest wrestling video game of all time, and it's on the N64.
Interesting. We'll tease that for a future date. That's one I do not know of at all.
A lot of people actually don't know that I own it. So
interesting. That's cool, man. That is some cool stuff there. That is absolutely awesome. How about that? So
I don't
know, man. I don't know about that, but I can tell you that's a show. We got a lot more coming up over the week, so you'll see our game reviews for the previous week, and we'll have our recap on the week, and then we'll be back here next week every Monday and Tuesday at 7:00. So a little bit of a long show, but had a lot of stuff to get to and good stuff, man. So that's how we do it, man. So I'm Steve M3TR1CS. That's your boy,
DJ TRIGGS.
And together we are No Debate Sports, and that's No Debate.